Welcome to the Seller Roundtable e-commerce coaching and business strategies with Andy Arnott and Amy Wees.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Andy Arnott with
Amy Wees.
And this is Seller Roundtable number 101. And we have Alex Hobson here today. Alex, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're gonna talk. Alex is the bestest. Is that a real word, Amy? The bestest. He is a magician when it comes to getting creative with your products and how to patent maybe a certain sub element of that product. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Alex.
Yeah, I've gotten some pretty interesting things patented that, at first glance, you'd say, well, there's no way in heck you can get that patented. But there are strategies you can use to influence the patent office to get them through.
Awesome. So before we get started, we'd love to know, get to know you a little bit better. Maybe give us some background, maybe where you're born, where you grew up, past jobs, kind of why you got into this. We always like to have a little bit of background.
Sure. Well, I moved around a lot as a kid. I was originally born in North Carolina, but I moved all around, and I'm now out in Arizona. I went to school for mechanical engineering, and then I went to work for W.L. Gore and Associates. And people, especially in Idaho there, you know about Gore-Tex garments for outdoor in the winter. But they make a lot of other products. I started off in product development, and I invented a lot of new products and materials for the company. And so I started to get involved in writing the patents with the patent attorneys. And then I realized I could become a patent agent. And a patent agent has to have a technical degree, just like a patent attorney. Patent agent has to pass the patent bar, which is administered by the patent office, to make sure that you know what you're talking about. And then you can represent people in front of the patent office, and you can help them get patents at a much reduced fee over a law firm, which is what I did. So to be a patent attorney, you then also have to have a law degree, and then you're a patent attorney. And then the difference is they can represent people in court, whereas I can just get your patent issued, and then if you want to go after somebody for infringement, you need to get a patent attorney. So that's that end of it. So I realized I could become a patent agent, so I took the patent bar, passed it, and then I started writing full applications for engineers and scientists at Gore. And I worked there for about 20 years and wrote a bunch of patents for their scientists. And then about 10, 11 years ago, I decided to go out on my own and start my own practice writing patents. And so for the last 10 years, I've written about almost, let's say 900 plus patents around my docket. So it's a lot. And the allowance rate that's a metric of how effective a patent attorney or agent is at getting their patents allowed. And it's the percentage of patents that get issued that they file and prosecute through the patent office. And my allowance rate is over 80%. And the national average is around 50 typically, or sometimes less than 50. So I also would like to tell your listeners, if they're vetting someone to help them prepare and file a patent, they should ask them, what is their allowance rate?
Interesting. That's a pro tip. I love that. Getting into, most of our listeners, watchers are in the e-com space. So, they might be looking at maybe a product that currently exists and then iterating on that, making some changes and things like that. But in your experience, what are some of the big struggles that brand owners face when they, first think about getting patents?
Well, to get something patented, you have to have something that's unique and something that's non-obvious. And so if it's a consumer product and it's very similar to other products, it may be difficult to kind of think about what would be the unique aspect of that. But, if you have even one minor improvement on an existing product, that improvement, if it's not obvious, can be the key basis for getting your patent allowed and issued. So that's really the main thing you need to think about is, what have I done to improve it? And is it significant? Like, sometimes people will say, well, I'm going to add a cup holder to whatever it is. I call it the proverbial cup holder. And I'm like, well, if that improvement doesn't really add a lot of advantages and, make the product better, that probably isn't going to help you get it allowed. It has to be an improvement that, makes it better.
Right. That makes sense. So can
Yeah.
you give me an example of, maybe something that you worked with in the past where there was a item that could be considered similar, but, they iterated on it, or they got some kind of new spin on it to where they were able to then patent the product?
Well, most patents are improvement patents because, other than, totally new materials, or, coming up with a new element. I mean, everything is some combination of known materials that you're putting together in some unique way. Let me see here. So, we recently got a patent issued, and it's a people maybe have heard about the TheraCane, right? And that's a cane that you can use to rub on your back. And so the inventor that I worked with, they said, well, we want to have one with a handle on it so you can get better leverage. We want that handle to be adjustable along the length of the cane. So we prepared the patent application, and we talked about how that that handle was slidably attached, to the elongated portion of the TheraCane. I'm using patent language, but yeah, and so we were able to get it through. I mean, it took at least one office action and talking to the examiner in what's called a phone interview. But we talked about how that really made an improvement in the device, because you can apply more pressure, at different points on the body, because you have that adjustable position of the handle. So that's one example.
Awesome. So, say that, Joe's out in his garage, coming up with his next new invention, and he's got something kind of started to put together, but he wants to go share it. He wants to get, input from his neighbors or from people at work. When should somebody start really thinking about, patent or patent protections? At that point, should they be trying to go for a provisional patent to kind of shop the idea around? What would that look like in your mind?
Well, really, the U.S. is under what's called first to file now, and that changed back in 2013. And so you really don't want to disclose your idea to anybody until, unless you have an agreement, a confidentiality agreement, until you get at least a provisional patent filed. And so really the first step, like when you start working on something, you think, oh, this is really cool. I think I might have an invention. Should I file a patent, or what should I do? I would really encourage people to just first maybe go on Google and do a lot of searches for that product. And then if they're satisfied that they can't find anything like it, then call somebody like me to do a patent prior art search. Because there's lots of things in the patent literature and also in other databases that you might not be aware of by just doing a Google search. And so then if the patent agent or attorney doesn't find anything that looks similar, then I would say, yeah, go ahead and prepare provisional or regular patent or non-provisional and get it filed. But the cost, it's really an important step of due diligence to do the patent prior art search before you prepare a patent. And the cost of it's much less than preparing a patent application. So I think that's really a wise first step for anybody who thinks they have something that's unique and of value.
So basically,
Awesome.
they need to search and see. What I love to do, because I think people will go to like Google patents, and if you aren't familiar with patent language, it's really hard to search for a similar product, right? Because in a utility patent, you're patenting the way that something is used or the way that it works. So it's not like if I'm searching, I create a new bottle with a new type of cap that's interesting and different than any other bottle on the market. I'm not going to be able to just search for bottle, right? I'm going to have to really search for the way that something works. So what I love to do is do like a Google search for similar products. And then I will see, like, go to their website and stuff and see if I can find any information. But do you have any tips, I guess, for amateurs when they're first doing that patent search? Because that's a question that I get all the time. Of course, I always tell them, like, search on your own, but then hire a patent attorney or a patent agent. I have 2 patent agents that I love. You and Don are like my 2 go-to patent agents. But the thing is, do you have any tips for we have a lot of brand owners and they're constantly bringing new things to market. And the other side of it is they're worried that something they're bringing to market infringes on someone's patent. So that's the reason they're doing a search.
Right.
So what's the easiest way or the most effective way for us without becoming patent agents ourselves to do a search like that?
Well, like you said, there's Google Patents. You can actually also use the USPTO, United States Patent and Trademark Office. They have a search database you can use. It's a little bit more clumsy than Google Patents, but I would really recommend using what's called freepatentsonline.com, because you can type in a couple of keywords, and they'll give you a list of patents that kind of match that keyword phrase. And then if you click on one and you think it's close, it'll then show you the ones underneath that were referenced when it was being prosecuted by a patent office. So you can then if you see one there that looks even closer, just click on it, and it's super user friendly and easy, and you can kind of progressively get closer and closer to your idea, and that's a good way, I think, for people to start. There's other ways you can do what's called assignee search. Like you said, you'll go and you look for similar products, you look at the companies. Somebody like me, I ask people before I do a search, do you know of anybody else that has something similar? What are the names of the companies? And I'll do assignee searches, looking for any patents that are assigned to those companies. And sometimes I do an assignee search and it's like 1,000, right? And I'm like, well, that's still too many to go through. Then I say, so in my search, I subscribe to a professional searcher database, but then I can do the assignee search, and then I can say, okay, now subset that by a particular class or subclass within the patent office, or I can say, or subdivide it or sub search it by some keywords too. So it makes it easier for me to narrow in on things a lot quicker, having that database. But yeah, I'd say go to Free Patents Online. And if you are ambitious enough to try to do some other types of searching, you can search by assignee on the USPTO, and you can also search by class and subclass, because whenever patents are filed, they get put into a class and a subclass, and you can go onto the USPTO website and look at the classification descriptions, and you can search those, and you can kind of find some that are similarly describe your product, and then you can kind of totally scour those particular classes and subclasses. But that's, again, a little bit more work. So it gets
got it.
Really, but
right. So that's such a great tip to also look by classes, because then you're going to find multiple products that are similar to yours. Like, especially like if you're making dog toys, or you're making a type of a knife or something like that, like that's going to fall into that subclass, and you're going to be able to search. Or if you're making a kitchen container or something like that,
right.
It's all going to be there, and then you can kind of go through those and look at the drawings and get an idea. So let's talk about, this is always the scary part. People are like, okay, so I need to file my provisional so that I can get patent pending, and that buys me a year, right? But that's only for a utility patent. It's not for a design patent. We'll get into that in a minute, but but can we get into length of time? So, I have some patents that were good to go, especially design patents. They can be granted in as little as 6 months. And I have utility patents that have taken a lot longer, and I'm still fighting. So when it comes to timing, how long does it take to get a patent after filing the application, and what can be done during this period of time?
Well, you have options. If you file a provisional and don't do anything for a year, you've already set 1 year, of time. And then if you file non-provisional and you just file it the regular way, it typically takes anywhere from, I'd say, 18 months to 2 years before you get your first office action. So if you did the provisional and then a non-provisional with regular filing, you're looking at 2.5 to 3 years before you get your first office action. So if that's not acceptable to you, there's other options. So one option is, don't wait, don't file a provisional at all, just file a regular non-provisional first, which will cut off a year. Or you can, if you file provisional, you might be spending a few more months, maybe 6 months, getting your concept really nailed down. Don't wait the full year. Go ahead and file 6 months after you file your provisional. A lot of people kind of just mindlessly say, okay, I filed my provisional, I'm going to wait the full year. But you don't have to. You can file it you can file a non-provisional the next day if you want to. Then there's other options. If, for example, one of the inventors is over the age of 65, you can get free accelerated examination based on age. So you can file it with that petition, and you're probably going to get an office action back within about 6 months to 8 months. Then there's also what's called a track one prioritization or prioritized examination request. Now that costs some money. So if you want to file that with your non-provisional, it's going to be accelerated, just like I said, for the petition based on age, and you're going to get a feedback within about 6 months to 8 months. And the fee for that for a micro entity, I think is either 1,000 or 500. I get confused. Let me look it up. Yeah, it's actually 1,050. So the request for prioritized examination is 1,050. But then instead of waiting 1.5 years to 2 years, you're going to get feedback in probably 6 months. And I've filed patents for people with the track one request, and I actually got a notice of allowance, I think like 6 weeks later. So I think that might be a record. I'd like to know what the record is, but that's super, super fast.
Yeah, that is pretty fast. So let's say that I go and we already talked about how to search by class, how to search by assignee, how to use free patents online, all of those resources. How do we know when we see a product that might be similar to ours? Do you have any tips? Like when I read patent language, it's really confusing. Do you have any tips for kind of deciphering whether or not you might be infringing on someone else's idea or someone else's patent with your idea or your differentiation of a product?
Okay. Yeah. So what you would do is say you find a patent that looks like it describes or is kind of similar to your product. Number one, what you want to do is determine whether or not that patent is actually active. So you can go to the United States Patent and Trademark Office and go to public pair and type in the patent number or the application number, and then it will show you, have they paid their maintenance fees? Is it an active patent? A lot of patents are issued and they're granted, but then 3.5 to 4 years later, people don't pay the fees to maintain it, and it's actually abandoned. So if it's abandoned, and especially if it's been abandoned for quite some time, you can feel pretty comfortable that is now in the public domain. The owner of the patent can revive a patent if it's gone abandoned for failure to pay the maintenance fees. But if they haven't done it within a couple of years, they have to have a pretty darn good reason as to why they didn't pay the fees on time. So that's the first thing. Make sure it's actually active. Now, the other thing too is you probably, when you go on pair, you want to look at cross references to see if there might be other patents that are in the patent family. Like, so when you file a patent, sometimes you get the first one issued, then you'll file a divisional or a continuation, or they may file what's called a continuation in part. So there could be a lot of patents that are very similar to the one that you're looking at, that that one you're looking at might be abandoned, but there might be other ones that aren't. So you really need to understand the entire patent family for that application. So then you can look at, for the patents that are active and issued, you can then go to the claims, and you want to look at the independent claims, and for you to infringe, you have to have each and every element listed in the claim, or really an equivalent thereof. So when you look at that, you basically read, say it has a handle, say for example, it's a cane, right? A therapeutic cane. So you would say it has, elongated straight portion, it has a curved portion. You'd say, yeah, my product has that. Does it have a handle? Yes, it has a handle, so for example, if my client with that therapeutic cane application found a patent that had the handle, but it wasn't slidably engaged, they would infringe because they have all the elements, but they have an additional feature. Their feature is that the handle is slidable. So they would be dominated by the other patent that talked about therapeutic cane with a handle that extends from the side, because they have all the same elements. So that's a big thing that you need to look into before you go to market, because if you spend a lot of money to make your product and marketing, all the other stuff that you spend money on, and then you find out, oh, well, I'm dominated by somebody else. As soon as you get out there in the public and start making money, or maybe even before, you're probably going to get a letter from those people saying, hey, that you're infringing our patent. You need to cease and desist. So again, to infringe, you have to have each and every element of the claim. So you have to just kind of methodically go through it. And some people do what's called a claim construction table, and they'll pull out each statement of the claim, and they'll kind of check it. Like, do we have that part? Okay, yes. Next one. Do we have that part? Check. Okay, we got it. So that's the exercise you have to go through.
Got it. So Andy, did you have a question? No,
No,
okay.
I didn't.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard you say something, so I didn't want to interrupt you. So for example, with the cane product, the reason that your client was able to gain a patent for that is that they changed the handle on the product to actually function differently. So even though the product was essentially the same as the other patent, and they would have infringed on it had they just kept it the same, because they changed the handle and they were able to say ours functions differently. It's used in a slightly different way, in the way that it functions. So they were able to patent it because of that. So if I'm just recapping what you're saying about that, it's basically like, I need to read through the claims. I need to understand all of the patents, because some strategies that big companies use, and even small companies use, like what I did with mine, when I'm waiting for my utility patent to get approved, I've filed multiple design patents so that at least I can protect each part of my product, because design patents get approved fairly quickly. So, what you're saying is you need to understand every part of that patent family, because had they, filed multiple patents on it that you didn't look at, and you only looked at one, then you might be infringing on something and not realize it. And I agree with you completely. Like, you should do some searching on your own, but you should hire someone who understands how to look at that patent family and how to really understand what you're getting into, right?
You really should, yes.
And you're not just saying that because you sell services, right? Like, I mean, it is important. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people get into trouble, and that would be crazy, right? In terms of, if you do infringe on someone's patent, they can literally sue you for all the profits that you have gotten, and then damages and then some. So that would not be any fun.
Yeah, that would not be good. Yeah. So I do want to make sure that people understand that you can get a patent issued and granted on an improvement, but you can be dominated by somebody else's issued patent. So you can get a patent in your hand, like, hey, yeah, I got a patent on this improvement, but you actually are not allowed, if the company decides to send you a cease and desist letter, you're not allowed to actually make it and sell it. So it's kind of weird. But
oh wow, so like your TheraCane guy with his slidable handle,
right.
If the original makers of the TheraCane would have said, like, no, this is all you did was change the handle,
right.
They could have said, no, you can't do this.
But that the particular references related to just the cane with the handle are old and they're expired, so that's okay. But if it had been an issued and active patent, that would be a case where they got the patent allowed because they improved it, but they're dominated by somebody else's issued and active patent.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, can we talk a little bit about provisional patents? I think people are always confused by these because they're called patents, but they're not really patents, right? Like, no one's actually reviewing that. So can you tell us, what is a provisional patent and how can it be useful?
Well, a provisional patent is, really has, it's a patent application you file to set your priority date. So as I mentioned before, the US is operating under first to file. And so if you have a great idea and you want to explore it more, and you maybe want to talk to some people or whatever it might be, you might want to file the provisional patent to set your date of filing, so that if anybody files after that date, you would be first to file and you would get the patent, over them. And so a provisional patent, really the requirements from the USPTO are very minor when it comes to what the provisional patent needs to look like. You can take a piece of paper, you can write down your concept and describe it as thoroughly as you can. You can sketch up, 2, 3, 4 figures and label them and send it in. And the fee is only $75. So they're not going to be making sure that you have proper claim language. They're not going to be making sure that your line drawings are proper in terms of clarity and you have everything numbered properly. Like I said, it's just a really great way for people to get something filed quickly to cover their idea. Now, with that being said, if you do file a 1-paragraph provisional patent with one little sketch and you wait a full year, and then you go to file your non-provisional and you work with somebody like me who's going to write a real proper patent application, and we put together a 10-page application and 8 pages of figures, and we write up all the claims, probably most of those claims that we file in that non-provisional a year later will not get the benefit back to your provisional, because the claims in that non-provisional, to get the date back to the provisional, have to be supported by whatever you said in that provisional, right? So if you don't say very much, you're not going to really support very many claims later.
Yeah, the way that my agent described it to me when I was originally filing mine was, we want to make the the provisional as strong as possible, because if someone else invented something in that time frame, right, as well, and then we're suddenly filing our non-provisional and all of our claims are perfect and they're different from what we originally filed, then they can go back and look at that and go, well, no, we have proof we invented this before, or we did this before. And so what we did was we tried to write as good of a provisional as we possibly could, where we could basically just make like a couple of tweaks and file a non-provisional.
That's exactly what I do. So my fees for preparing a provisional are, the same as a non-provisional, but then when you get to the 1-year point for the non-provisional, it's just a really minor fee to review it and file it as a actual non-provisional. And the other thing too, like if you do a really sparse provisional, you kind of feel like, oh, okay, I have it covered. But then you might get out in the public domain, you might be describing it, and you might be describing stuff that you really didn't even write in the provisional. So now your public is disclosing, alternative embodiments that you never even filed on. So, people get this sense of security by filing these really short provisionals. That's not a good idea.
Thanks for tuning in to part 1 of this episode. Join us every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for live Q&A and bonus content after the recording at sellerroundtable.com. Sponsored by the ultimate software tool for Amazon sales and growth, sellerseo.com and amazingathome.com.